bit, feel free. There are times when I will stop and pause and say, hey, do you guys have any questions, or do you, and that helps me sort of move along as well. So so how many of you all who are here, who has done dyeing? Okay, so just so that you guys know, I'm fairly, just a little, that's great, because I'm kind of a newbie dyer too. So I am fairly new to dyeing, like natural dyeing. So the first time I ever tried it was with my daughter, and we went to Griffin Dyeworks Retreat a few years back. And, you know, they had all the dye pots going and everything, and it seemed so complex. It was like, oh my gosh, there are all these different moving parts and pieces and things like that going on. And so it was a little bit like, wow, how can I do this at home? And before that, I had done a lot of food color dye, because I lived in a very tiny apartment in Venice, and there's no space. I don't want any little particles floating around. I want things that, you know, if I'm eating it, I kind of, you know, I'm not going to eat my fiber. Well, not that kind of fiber, but you know, if I'm eating things, I really want to, you know, not have any chemicals and heavy materials and things around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about two different types of crockpot dyeing, and then a microwave dyeing technique, and they're easy peasy. And so when we go through this, it's fairly short, you know, what I'm going to show you, because a lot will end up in the dye pot, so you may not see the actual things themselves. But as we're going through, I will sort of talk, and I will show you some pieces that I've made with each technique. So if you guys are cool, I did prepare like a little PowerPointy thing so that we can add that as a handout later on. And it also kind of breaks up, you know, sometimes we get zoomed out seeing people's faces. So as I know, and as probably many of you know well, so it kind of helps to break up things as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You guys are going to see the wonder that is my my computer here, and hopefully all of you guys can see everybody can see my screen, the easy peasy dyeing. Thumbs up. Awesome. So basically anything that I've written, a lot of things, these are just, this is just what I do. And I have some resources and things for you. But, you know, if you want to share this out with anybody or whatever, it's fine. I put it under Creative Commons. Go ahead. It's not copyrighted. It's meant to be used, not abused, but used. So, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about crockpot dyeing and microwave dyeing. And unfortunately, there's going to be some back and forth as I take you through my house and not show you the mess that is my house. So we might have some tracking shots going on here too in this session. So so with a crock pot, I'm just going to show you how I set up my easy peasy natural dye pot. And everything that I'm going to show you is natural. Alex, you can come sit over here. It's fine. Natural or foraged materials that I've gotten from my backyard. And then I'm also going to just show you a couple of easy peasy food dye methods as well. And my lovely assistant will be helping me as well, and we will be using water, and it'll be a mess. So I promise it will be exciting. As we're doing that as well, after we do those, we're going to jump into the microwave dyeing, which is so super simple, and it's great for smaller bits of fiber. So when I'm doing, for example, when I'm doing felting and that sort of thing, I like to use that. I haven't tried the microwave dyeing with the natural dyes, just because with natural dyes you tend to have to use heavy metals and other things for your mordants, and I don't want that stuff in my microwave. So that's this is my if I want to make something pretty and I want to make it right away, I microwave dye it. So I'm lazy. I actually wanted to call this lazy dyeing, and then I thought, well, that doesn't sound right. But I'm the lazy dyer. So just some basic materials, and you guys will, it's a little hard to see because I have my setup, but I have things like measuring spoons. I have 2 crock pots floating around. I like to use, I'm going to come up here and show you guys. I have, you know, just measuring cups and as everybody's, and a thongs to pull things out of the pot. And my other favorite thing is You know, since we're all getting colds and stuff, the dosing cups, I love using these. You know, my husband likes NyQuil a lot, and I use Dayquil because I seem to have a big sinus problem recently. So we have lots of these little cups, and so it's pretty easy to measure. And if you're only doing small amounts of food color, sometimes those dyes can be very, very vibrant. And this is great if you're just trying to do like a rainbow colored thing. And they also have a couple of eyedroppers and syringes and things. So those are most of the things. With food coloring and easy peasy natural dyeing, and not going into work these days and not having to go to the office and worry about having pink and purple and blue hands. And those are some parrots. That's awesome. I tend to not worry about gloves, but you know, food prep gloves work really well if you're using food dye and you have to go somewhere the next day. So they don't ask like, why do you look like Cookie Monster? Because I've had that happen. But with natural dyeing, I don't usually use the gloves as much, just because I'm not really touching anything that I have to worry about. I tend to use only things that I know are safe, and I've foraged in my own area. So I also usually have washing soap around. With natural dyes, I like to, it's not really natural dyeing, I know, but I like to use what they call synthropol. You can get it online. You can get a big container like this, and you only need like a couple of drops in there. And I find that keeps the dye holding it in really well. But sometimes I usually use eco dyes aside, or ecover or 7th generation aside from that. And for the microwave dyeing, I just use a Pyrex little dish, and I found that it should only be in my dye stuff, but the other day I found it in our cupboard. And the cool thing is, because I never used anything toxic in there, even if my family accidentally ended up using it before I found it, nobody's gonna be poisoned. So please make certain to label things in permanent marker, like do not use, because yeah, I was looking for it everywhere and I'm like, where is it? And then I looked in our thing, and there it was. And then saran wrap. So for the microwave dyeing. So this is kind of just your basic list. I just have everything all together and put in a little box and everything. So now, one of the things we all know when we do natural dyeing is, and it's overwhelming, is all the different words like mordants, like you could use soy milk and all these, and that's great. Again, I'm kind of lazy, and so I only use 2 different mordants on a wide variety of things. And the 2 things that I use are alum, and I think I might even have I don't have my alum out here. And then I use citric acid. So citric acid is kind of my go-to, and you can use vinegar as well. I just like citric acid because I've had this container or this bag for years and years and years, and it never seems to, I never seem to get through it. So it's cheap. So this is my also easy peasy cheap way of dyeing. Another thing that you will need is soda ash, and I'm not going to go over how to do that, but if you're dyeing cellulose fibers, like pieces of fabric, that's a really great thing to do. So I'm pretty much just going to show you how to do this on wool, and then you can practice some of the same things on other fibers. Yeah, and I'm going to reiterate that the citric acid powder is way more cost effective. So so in terms of fiber prep, this is what we're going to be doing. I'm going to just start. I have one going already, but basically what we do is we're just going to soak our wool and our fiber in a container. So when I get my other camera going, we'll be able to see that a little bit better. You know, usually I just soak for about 15 minutes or so, but and I use just a little bit of alum or citric acid. And I actually, with the natural dyes, am finding that I really like to use just a little bit of alum. So I use about a teaspoonful of alum or so, just with, depending on how much fiber I have, just a little bit in there. You don't want to use too much when you're using it with wool, because it makes it really gummy and feeling really icky. So I just, less is more. And then if you feel like things aren't taking up, you can, you know, with wool, you have to remordant. You don't have to with cotton. Or you can go in and you can try over dye or try it again. So, and for wool, I just use about a little 1 to 2 teaspoonfuls. I actually use the Yogurt Land little spoons. I just keep it inside of my citric acid to soak in water. And then you drain it and spin it, whatever you want to do. Yeah. John,
Katie,
question.
what temperature do you want that first soak of water to be? Hot,
Great
medium,
question.
cold?
Right. So I actually, because I'm lazy and easy peasy, it depends on where I'm doing it. So right now I'm outside and I just have it in cold water. And I sometimes with wool or silks, you don't want it super hot. You want it to be a little bit maybe lukewarm so room temperature to lukewarm, because what's going to happen if you're using protein fibers is we're going to heat the fibers up from whatever temperature they're at. So they're not going to be shocked too much. Now with I do the same thing with when I do cottons, so cotton roving, and I've done a lot of cotton sheets and things just to practice with. I tend to just put that in something that's a little bit just a little bit hot, like tap water. I'll just turn on and let my tap water start running hot, and just it's not super hot. I don't want necessarily and more than anything that and keep it too hot. And a lot of times what I do is I'll just forget about things. So I'm just telling you, this is like, this is if you just want to just have fun with natural dyeing or any other kind of dyeing, I just sometimes forget about stuff. And my husband will go, because I use the sink in our bar, which is stainless steel. And my husband will go fix us a cocktail at happy hour. And he'll be like, hey, what's this stuff in the sink? And I'll be like, oh yeah, that's my fiber. I had mordanting. So, with wool, it's okay because I'm going to heat the wool up from whatever temperature to hot gradually. And with cotton is pretty flexible, but you do want a little bit of heat probably with cotton. So great question. Any other questions while I'm sort of going through this in terms of fiber prep? So like I say, I make it really super easy. Now, our amazing other folks that we have in the Griffin Dyeworks and fibery community, the real honest to goodness natural dyers who have taught me, and they're so incredible. They will have probably more structured ways of mordanting and different mordants that they use. But I really have, I started doing this when we went in pandemic, when we started the pandemic. Need to do something that connects me to this earth. And so I just started going out and finding stuff and throwing it in the pot. And so these are the things that I found were really easy to start with. And now as I'm starting to learn more and research more and connect more, then I sort of branch out a little bit. But these were my first things. So that's my fiber prep for protein. And for, like I said, for cellulose, basically what you have to do with cellulose fibers, not so much, it depends if you get roving and sliver, that's cotton or cellulose from, I had some that was pre-mordanted. So sometimes you can get things that already have some nasty chemicals on them, unfortunately. Those I just threw straight into the dye pot. But the things that I have that are like sheets or muslin or things that I want to dye that are fabric, I scour those. And so my way of doing that, again, I just put it in with about 2 teaspoons of soda ash in my crock pot. I just put some water in and some dish soap and soda ash. I put it on high in the crock pot for about an hour or so, turn it off, and I let it soak overnight. And that seems to work pretty well. So I have a question here, I think, in the chat. Do you guys have any questions at this point? Cellulose, plant fibers. Yeah, so plant fibers, things like cotton, if you have something that like a bamboo sheet set or something like that. So cotton, bamboo, rayon, probably flax. Flax is a little harder to dye, so I haven't practiced with flax. So basically this is just anything that's like a cotton sheet. So and I've got a whole bunch of things over here to show you guys. So I'll show you what some of these look like. And so then, with that, I just kind of let it soak overnight. And it's a good thing too, because when you open up the lid of the crock pot, after you've soaked anything that's like a sheet or something. So I had some muslin sheets, beautiful muslin sheets that my mom had from the 1950s, and she's like, they're still shrink wrapped or whatever they did back then. And I opened that up and I scoured it, and the chemical smell that came off of that was incredible. So it's so important to do this, because things like cotton, actually they use so many bleaching agents, they use so much in the production of it, they sometimes put wax on it, and so the dye is not going to hit well. But I just let it soak overnight, and then also when you open it up, that smells not as bad, because when I went in to check it that evening, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, I'm not opening it up till tomorrow. So I basically put things in maybe sometimes around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I'll go check the next day. I'll turn the temperature off, but then check and see what my dye pots are doing. So my easy way of mortising cottons is pretty similar. So I might take I might have a piece of fiber that's like this, like a little sheet, and I might stick it in and it's a little hard to see, my lighting's not great, but I might stick it in the in my sink, and just soak it overnight with just a little bit of soda ash and alum sometimes, or just alum. I usually just use alum for cotton. But there are other things you can use. And so those are, the people like Teresa and Ursula are great resources for, and Laura are great resources in the community to talk to about some of the other experiments they've had with a lot of the other mordants. So
Katie, this is John again.
Yeah, John.
Do you have suggestions or hints on where we can look around to find things like alum or soda ash or some of these other mordants?
Absolutely. Great question. So I've gotten most of my stuff from Griffin Dyeworks. Yay. I'm just shamelessly plugging Griffin today. But I have some alum from them, and soda ash in small amounts. There are a couple of places online. There's Dharma, Dharma, and I can type that in the chat. Let me go up here just a bit. Up. Nope, of course not, because Zoom loves to hide my little button here. So I'll just type it in the chat. There's Dharma Trading, which is up north, and they're like in Santa Rosa, and they have a very great online presence. There's another place called the Woolery, and they're in Kentucky, I believe, and they're really amazing as well. And there are lots of there's one other place that I go called Paradise Fibers. And so if I want cotton, if I want to spin cotton, that's already been prepped with a mordant and prepped to dye, Paradise Fibers has some really good cotton sliver, cotton roving, essentially, that you can get before you spin. And I've had a lot of success with that. I bought tons of it, not knowing that I was going to be growing my own cotton and trying to go super natural. And so now I'm just trying to use it up, and that will take up the dye just like that. So there are lots of different places to go. And of course, I'm going to shameless plug for Griffin. So I usually I just buy a little bit, so I have just a titch of alum and just a titch of soda ash, and I have not used that much, just because I'm dyeing in smaller quantities. That because I'm dyeing in so many small quantities, I don't have to worry too much about having gobs of it. So a little goes a long way with all of those. The citric acid, I will type that in here. I know we're trying all not to buy from Amazon, but unfortunately, they're a good place, but that's where I just went to Amazon and got that. Some stores that have canning supplies might have citric acid, and they're just in a small little jar. But I had a real tough time finding that, so I had to actually do that one online. So those are where I really get my little supplies. And I was gifted alum and soda ash a couple of years ago by a friend, and I'm still using those up, and they were just little packets like this big. So great question. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to just so that you instructions for you in a handout, etc. afterwards. But basically, with natural dyeing in the crock pot, I just go, I forage for my materials, I fill up my pot, I stick the materials in, turn the pot on for a while, and then see what's going to happen. So I'll show you what I do with that. And the things that are a little bit more tweaky to do, actually, the things that I find a little bit harder sometimes are the food coloring for the protein fibers in the crock pot. So you can only use food colors with protein fibers like wool, alpaca, silk. I had a silk sample, but it disappeared somewhere. So there are some different things that you can do, some different techniques and things that I've also linked to in the handout. So there's a nice website. I think her name is Fiber Artsy, and she's done a great job of teasing out some of the different techniques that you can do if you want multicolored rovings, or if you're putting a piece of felt in there, for example. I usually just also stick felt in the dye pot and see what happens. So my whole family says that or whenever they walk outside, they're like, our house smells like sheep. So like sheep that's roasting, not good sheep, not like lamb, not like heroes or something like that. So these are the instructions here, but again, I'm going to walk you through these, so I'm not going to read those out, but I just want you guys to know that they're there. And also same for the microwave instructions. They're also here on this PowerPoint, aka handout, that I'll shoot out to the crew afterwards. And basically it's just putting your stuff in a dish and playing with it and seeing what happens. I like to start out with lighter colors. I think you'll hear this from most of us who dye things, that we like to start out with lighter colors because you can always over dye. So sometimes I end up with something I'm like, oh my God, that looks really yucky. And so then I'll just put it in, and I might dye it with like it might turn out sort of brownish, and I might try to hit it, especially with the food dyes, because sometimes you just don't know what you're getting. I might dye it with a really like a vibrant blue or something, and then it will really come out a neat color. So just so that you know, if you mess up with a lot of these, you can always, as long as you haven't gone too dark in your dye pot or with your microwave dye, you can always over dye things. So there's no such thing as a mistake. It's just a creative happenstance. So and I also have some resources for you all. I have some books. There are 2 or 3 books that I as a newbie natural dyer really love, and so I am going to shout out to the Dyer's Garden. So a lot of these things she talks about are things that you can either forage or grow yourself. I just have a small patio and then a little plot in our city garden, and I'm able to grow quite a bit of dye stuff in there. So that's a great little book, and she really teases out the different mordants and how to use those in a very user-friendly way. So that is my go-to Bible for natural dyes. And then on the web, there's some really great resources for Kool-Aid and food dyeing. And my favorite is Rebecca Ron, and she has a great food dye color chart, which we had somewhere up here. Oh yeah, which we'll show you. But it's pretty neat. It goes through, and she actually she tells you like how many drops of each color to use to get certain colors. So she's a teacher who's done that. So at this point, are there any questions before we try to navigate and switch to our second camera? Jocelyn or Megan? Nope, that's cool. Wow, that means hopefully I've done a good job. So also what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing for a sec here before I switch to my other camera. So we're just getting my camera woman, my camera teen almost is getting ready to do that. Just so that you know, it's always a little hard to see on Zoom. Colors never show up, but this is, you may be able to see it a little bit, but this is it's a sort of an orangey folded accordion fold piece that I put into my crock pot with loquat leaves. So I'll talk a little bit about dye stuff when we switch cameras. And those are from my garden. And so that made a really beautiful orange dye. And down the street, we have a lot of eucalyptus trees. And so I've been playing with eucalyptus bark a lot. And that's a substantive dye, which means you don't even have to add a mordant. So I've just been throwing stuff in the dye pot straight. And so this is what that's a pretty true color there. So, you know, it's a little hard to see sometimes on Zoom and on cameras and lighting. But one of the things that people always tell me about is when you use Kool-Aid or natural or food dyes, they say, oh, those colors wash out. They'll never stay. You have to use the chemicals. And I actually made this really cool, and this one actually shows up pretty well on Zoom, cool little headband about 15 years ago with, I think it was with food dyes, not with Kool-Aid. And it's kept its color. So, and I wear it a lot. So you know, sometimes these dyes actually work for us really well. And one thing with easy peasy dyeing is sometimes you have a project in mind. And so I've tried that and it doesn't work. So then I have to over dye and it's never easy peasy at that point. But I just like to sample. So I'll just throw different things in the dye pot and see what happens. And so that's what I did. Since when the pandemic started, I just started throwing everything that was in my garden in the dye pot. And so this is a little shrug I made, and it's got all the different colors of things in my dye pot. And so the bottoms are, these are loquat leaves here. In the middle, this is getting into some of my coreopsis, which gives me orange. And up here, I'm getting into some pomegranates. So, you know, I just put, sometimes with easy peasy dyeing, because it's so easy, I just throw things in, see what happens. I might spin it up or I might use it if it's already spun, and then I will work with it. So that's just a little note. Like, the great thing about easy peasy dyeing is it's a good way to test things. It's a good way to beta test different dye stuff that you have and colors that you have, just to see how they're going to work. So so on that note, we're okay so far, everybody? Awesome. So we're going to probably try to join the meeting with our other camera. Yes. So my alter ego is going to be on, and okay, you can do it. Yeah. It's not working on my iPad at all. So so
you're here now.
We had no idea that we were lost until we started doing things. So we've actually done all of our stuff. But let me go ahead and just give you a tour of what we've got going on over here. I am so sorry about that. It's because we're doing multiple cameras, and I'm used to my own Zoom setup. So and my browsers and on all of my devices are set up. Zoom just had, I think they had a big data breach like last night or this morning. So I got a notification that there's a whole bunch of weird stuff going on and it's not opening in people's devices and things. So so anyway, sorry about that, you guys. But then you missed a lot of my talking, which is probably a good thing. So so what Alex and I have been doing over here is we've got a whole big old mess, and I'm going to turn my camera around here to our setup. And so our setup is basically, what we've done is, so I've taken the roving that I had in sitting, that I showed you guys, that I had sitting in a tub. What I do with my roving is I use about, here, because I'm tag teaming here since my setup got messed up. I use about a teaspoonful of citric acid, or 2 in the tub, depending on how much I have in there. And basically all Alex and I have done is we've taken our roving, our wool, and that was soaking in the citric acid, and I put it in a crock pot that's about 3/4 full of water. And we took some food dye. So it's a little hard to do here because I don't know where my camera is. Oops.
There we go. We took some food dye, and I put some into a little dosing cup and measured it out, and then put about a half a cup of water into a cup measurer. So basically, I'm gonna try to do this one-handed, since our tripod setup does not allow us to figure out what works and what doesn't work. So here is my cup. And sort of mix it up here. And then what I do is I gently just pour my food dye over my roving. And in this one, I'm doing a multiple colored dye pot. So I have added some different colors. Alex mixed some colors up that made purple, that made iris. And then I just used some straight neon blue in there. And if you want, now what happens with a lot of this is you can, you see a lot of white in here. And if you're using this for spinning, then I highly recommend just leaving the white, because that will give you some really great colors and some really great gradations. So if you don't want the white, if you want to cover everything up, then you can just tease some of the fiber into the dye pot here a little bit more, and that will start to cover up those white bits. But I actually like to leave a little bit of white in there. And then what I do with my dye pot is I just turn this on. So I have my dye pot on high, and hopefully it should be working and plugged in. I have it on high, and I will, with wool, I leave it on high for about an hour, and then I'll turn it down to either low, or I will turn it off completely. But I don't want it to heat up too much, but I do want it to heat up enough so that I'm going to have steam at the top of my pot here. So that's
Katie, quick question.
What I do there. Yes. Sure.
Or at least I noticed in your dye pot, the colors were kind of segregated. Will they remain segregated during the process, or will they all kind of blend together?
Right, great question. So I'm going to switch this over to my camera again. Sorry about that. Boy, we tried everything to set it up real professionally, and that's what happens. But if I keep it separate like this and I don't move it, what's going to happen is the colors are going to blend right here along this line a little bit, but they're going to pretty much remain separate here. But if I want to mix the colors a little bit more after they've hit the, and I love your spindle there. That's incredible.
This is a drop spindle by Artie Aragon up in the Navajo Nation.
Oh, that's so awesome. Oh, that's so cool. But if I want these to blend more, they will stay, because I've added color in different spots at different times. The initial color will be stronger, right? But then if I started to push this down a little bit more like this into the dye pot, like this, and mix it a bit, then you're going to see that those colors are going to start to blend a little bit more, but there will still be some separation. So it's all up to what you want to do. So I really like, I've done one color kettle dyeing in the dye pot before with food color, and it's worked really well. But I actually really love the dye pot for those little small bits and pieces, like if I want a colorful hat or something that's multicolored. And I tend to not go too far off on the color wheel. So I make certain that, for example, I'm not going to add a red and a blue or something like, I mean, I'll add a red and a blue together so that if they mix, it's okay, but I'm not going to add blue and orange together, for example, because then I will just end up with some mucky brown. So that's what I do there. So that's the easy peasy crock pot. And one of the things when my camera, I guess, stopped running, so what I'm going to do is, because we just ran through everything. We had no idea. We're looking at it. And we're like, oh my gosh, what happened? So anyway, it's kind of fun when that happens. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over to some of the dye stuff. So I think you guys might not have heard about some of the cool foraging dye stuff that I use. And so, this is probably a lot easier to do than my tripod. So sorry, we're doing this on the iPad here. So what we have here is when I do easy peasy natural dyeing, I try to use things that I find locally, and there's so much great stuff to find. So in my garden, I have a loquat tree. So here I have some loquat leaves there, and I have some green leaves and some brown leaves, and these are awesome. So I use the green leaves. I can get some really beautiful russets and salmon color and orangey colors with green leaves. So if you have a loquat tree sitting around, or if you know somebody who does, I know there are quite a few in the area, the leaves have enough tannin that they will, they don't require any mordants. I do mordant with them anyway. I still use the same mordants, either alum or citric acid, mostly alum. But the green leaves will give you a beautiful palette in oranges and salmons, and the sort of old crumbly brown leaves will give you an amazing palette of various browns. So I've gotten a beautiful chocolate colored brown and some light tans using the old crinkly leaves. So that's one of my go-to recent finds. Now my other find flew away here because it's also windy here, which is really fun. This is like the real anything that can go wrong goes wrong session, which is awesome. So, but another thing that I use is hibiscus. So I will use not the leaves, but I will use the flowers. And hibiscus flowers are very delicate. So when you put those in the dye pot, you don't want to put them on too high, on the heat too high. So I will gather old hibiscus flowers that have fallen on the ground from around my area, and I will go ahead and put those I'll throw them into my dye pot, and I get some really nice, with some alum as my mordant for both wool and for cotton, and I get some really beautiful, I've gotten some light browns and tans with those, but I've also gotten some nice grays. And that's also a neat one where if you don't like the color from the hibiscus, if you over dye it, you will get some really neat colors on top of that. So hibiscus actually is a nice color to use as a foundation for other colors if you want to play with that. So, but what I'm going to show you now is, and what we're set up to do here, we already sort of did it, but my ultimate new favorite dye stuff is, and there are tons of these all around LA, is eucalyptus bark. So a lot of people also use eucalyptus leaves. I haven't done those yet, but I hear they make some really beautiful oranges. So the eucalyptus bark will actually make, depending on how much dye stuff you have, will make anything from a light orange to a really dark, almost a rust color. So you can get some amazing colors. And then if you wanted to play around and maybe add some other things like iron, etc. afterwards, I tend not to do that. I just throw it in the pot and see what happens. And sometimes I leave it for a couple of days and let it soak. So, so what I've done here, and this is what we did when we thought our camera was on, Alex and I, is I have a pot here, my crock pot, my Instapot, and I'm gonna do it this way. And so what I've done is I've actually added eucalyptus bark to my Instapot, and I put in about like 4 really large pieces of bark here, and I've added that in. And so this has just been on for about, what, a half an hour or so. I guess, because that's about when you lost us. And so with the eucalyptus bark, I set this on my pressure cooker, or not my pressure cooker, my slow cooker on high for a couple of hours, just because the bark is so strong. I really want to break it down. Now, if I were using a flower or something like hibiscus, I would put it on low because I don't want that to get to burn. I don't, so, but bark will actually, let's see how much we've got here, how much color we've got so far. Bark will actually yield you a lot of color after a while. So you can see that just after 20 minutes in the dye pot there, I'm already starting to get a little bit of sort of a tan color already just after a few minutes in there. So I'm going to close that up for you guys. And then I want to show you my last favorite dye stuff for natural dyes. That is the best easy peasy dyeing that you can get. You can actually get quite a few oranges and yellows. And if you add iron to this afterwards, you know, do a little soak afterwards in iron, you can get, oh, tea dyeing. No, I haven't done tea dyeing yet. I need to practice with that. So I've just been mostly doing things that I forage. So these are Coreopsis buds that I grew in my garden. So I actually just put in my little community garden, I had a whole plot going with Coreopsis. And so I would just pick them every couple of days and dry them over the course of the summer. And so by the end of the summer, I ended up having about 2 jars worth of Coreopsis buds. And so I use maybe about a half a cup each time that I put it in the dye pot. So I'm sort of running low here. I use about a half a cup of this, and I will put my crock pot on low in terms of on the slow cooker, because again, it's not a barky substance. So I'll put it on low for a couple of hours and let that cook down, and then let it steep overnight, and then come back and see what the color's like. And if I decide that I want to do that again, or if I want more color to come out of there, then I will go back and I will redo that in my dye pot. So do you guys have any questions at this point? Let's see. Tea dyeing and other things. So I haven't done tea dyeing. So John asked about tea dyeing, but things like, so the Coreopsis is actually maybe a good example of this dye stuff that's more, you have to use a mordant with it. So it's not like the bark of the eucalyptus or the locust leaves, locust tree leaves, loquat tree, sorry. Things that are tea-like things, or any sort of flower, what you'll want to do when you do easy peasy dyeing is just put it into the slow cooker and make certain that it's on low for like about an hour, so that it's not boiling, but it's getting hot, so that it's steeping. I have used avocado peels, which are similar, and avocado pits in some ways, which have a similar amount of tannin. And I've also used pomegranates. So I actually have, you can see it in the background there. We're trying to avoid the messy garden, but I have a pomegranate tree over there. So any of the little pomegranate, baby pomegranates that fall off of the tree, any of those sorts of things, what I will do is, you know, if they don't fruit, then I will go ahead and I will put those into my dye pot. And so sometimes I might have 30 or 40 of the little baby jobs that don't become fruit quite yet. And I just throw them in the dye pot and let it steep. And that one I will put on, usually I put it on low for a couple of hours, turn it off, leave it overnight, see what color I'm getting. And then the next day, if I want more color if I want to get more color out of it, if I think I can, then I might repeat that. And sometimes with pomegranate dye pots and with Coreopsis, and with the eucalyptus, I've let that go for, I've kept that going for about 2 or 3 days before I even start dyeing. So yeah, any other questions? You guys can shout them out actually if you want. what properties am I looking for when I forage? That's a great question. So basically my all-time favorite book is called, and I'm going to sit over here where the lighting is better. My all-time favorite book is called The Dyer's Garden. And then there's another book that just came out called Journeys in Natural Dyeing. So that'll be in the handout. It's on Amazon. It came out maybe a couple of months ago. And so they actually go through, in that particular book, it's a journey through the world where they go through and they talk about different natural dyeing places that they've gone to, or different places that they go to that have a very robust natural dyeing culture. And so when I forage, I right now I've looked for things that I think might work. I don't experiment too much. I should maybe, but I know that things that have tannins in them, for example, might work. So somehow I had come across, while reading about natural dyeing, for example, that loquat leaves had a lot of tannins in them, and I said, hey, and so then I went and I found that out. So a lot of the natural dyeing books will tell you about a lot of the things around our area, either in Southern California or Northern California, here, that have dye properties. Now, if you're outside of the area here, there are a lot of the books also, a lot of these books also talk about different things that you can find. For example, sumac or oak galls, the knots that are made by the wasps, and my fingers are all brown now, but are blue now. Those things will will work really well with natural dyeing. So I have read that marigolds work well. I have not tried marigolds because I'm never successful at growing them. I did try yarrow is supposed to be a dye plant that works really well. And I did grow some, but when I tried it out, I only got gray. Some of the other things is, I'll read up and I'll see that lavender, for example, might make a nice natural dye. And so I have dyed with lavender, and I find that I might, if I'm lucky, I get a gray, but usually I get a blecky brown. So sometimes my experiments are more like, and then I over dye. So at this point, I've really stuck with my favorites, which are really the loquat, pomegranate, coreopsis, and to my surprise, not the plant so much, but the root of parsley. I had some parsley that I needed to pull out. It was done. It was the end of the season. And so I pulled out the parsley and I said, hey, I wonder what happens if I throw this in the dye pot. And so I think parsley, and sometimes I've read that carrots work really well as well. So when I forage, I tend to look for things that I have read about, that I know will yield me some dye stuff. I think at some point I might get more bold, but at this point I'm a little bit afraid. And any other questions?
Katie, I just put a link to a federal website on native plant dyes.
Thank you.
That has some really interesting information on it, and there's another one for plant dyes in the Southwest that I'm looking for. Absolutely. That details things like rabbit brush, wild carrot, and those types of dye stuff. So. Absolutely,
yes, those are amazing. And Hopi, so black sunflower, I tried that. I tried growing actually. I'm going to go in and check our microwave dye pot so I can show you guys what we did with that. Hopi sunflower is supposed to be really good, and that's supposed to yield browns and purples. I have not had success with that yet because my Hopi dye didn't work. What happened? Is this it? Oh, okay. Oh wow. We never put it in, but it's in. Where's my other pot? Oh, it broke? Yeah. Uh-oh. Okay, so I fixed it. Oh, okay. Trust me. So okay, so what we're gonna do is the last thing, because we had already done this, but then our camera wasn't on, but what I wanted to do was show you what we did in terms of microwave dyeing. So this is actually the result of what we did, and because my pot apparently broke because it's that kind of day. But basically what we do with microwave dyeing is you get a microwave safe bowl and you're going to put your water in it. And after it's been morded and make certain your fiber is just a little bit wet. It doesn't have to be very wet. And Alex, do you want to go get me a food dye? Yep. And then what we did here was we put a whole bunch we had some purples that Alex had put together and some different colors. So I'm going to show you how this works. So again, we like for the crock pot and for the microwave dyeing, we like to do this. And we also need and Alex, get me the saran wrap too, please. So basically, usually what we do is we put this in, since we've already dyed these, but I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm going to actually do some red because that will show up more and it will not cause too many problems. But what we do is I'll put my dyes in a dosing cap. So like I'm gonna do it this way. So I'll put my dyes usually in a dosing cap. I'll put a couple of drops of dye in that. And these are just the little caps that you get from like NyQuil and DayQuil and stuff. And so I like to save these up. And I will, depending on how much fiber I have, either just use the dosing cap, or I might use, I might pour water from the dosing cap into a cup measure and usually use about a cup of water. And I just pour that on my fiber like this. You can see pretty well that it's hitting the fiber here. So, and I just kind of keep doing that and keep building up color on my fiber. I try not to add too much water into this because what will happen is it will spill out too much, because usually I do want to keep some of these separate, maybe depends on what my goal is. But if I just want to, so I use this method mostly when I want to dye multicolored dye. But like when John asked, do you want to do dye where you have, you're not having so much variegation, then I will add a little bit more water to that. And so that makes it whatever color, red, purple, and pink. Like a pink almost. My fingers are going to be really fun tomorrow. Yours too. And then you will do me the honors of holding this and being my camera person. And then what we're going to do, so this is the colors that we added were the red on the top. So we had already dyed some color already onto this. And I don't want it too wet because it will boil, and I don't want it too dry because then it will burn. And then what we do is we just simply put this in our microwave. What do we do? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I think it's already set. So we do for about 5 minutes, and we make certain power. We have to do the power level first. Power level first. Yes, that's what I thought. So power level first. Power level 5, 0. And then time. And then wait, and then cooking time. Cooking time. Nope, it doesn't work. It's cooking time. We haven't done, it's been a while since we've done this. So, yeah. And then power level. And, you are not working. There we go. All right. So we will do this at 50% for about 5 minutes. We'll put it on 50% heat. And then if I want to do more, if I want to add more colors, just like we did now, or if I want to do any sort of, if I don't like the way the colors look and I want to over dye it, I'll do this. Now I use this a lot, this method, the 5 minutes for 50% power. I use the microwave dyeing method a lot if I want to dye something very quickly, or if I just want to sample and see how different things, how food dye hits my different fibers. If I'm trying a new breed, for example, if I'm trying a new wool breed, this is a great way to experiment without setting up a whole dye pot and without going through the whole process. So I am actually going to just stop this for a second, and I'm going to take this out just because we've already worked on this a little bit. And so you can see our dye has taken pretty well. And so what will happen is this will, once this cools, you'll see your colors a little bit better. And then you just rinse it out with some dish soap and maybe a little bit of extra citric acid or vinegar. Usually I put in maybe about a teaspoonful just to make certain that the colors stay on the fiber. So at this point, do you guys have any questions? Answer away. Do natural dyes work on both plant and animal fiber? So I'm going to switch my camera around since we're going to go back outside. Yes, so natural dyes will work on both animal and plant fiber. It just depends. The process that you use for preparing them is just a little bit different. So with animal fiber, it's really good to use some either alum or citric acid as your mordant. And with cellulose fibers, usually you want to, if it's something like fabric, you will want to scour it. So you want to put a little bit of soda ash and a little bit of soap into, and I do that into my crock pot. You'll want to do that and heat it up a little bit. And so I usually do, when I scour and I'm using fabric, I usually do about, let's say, a teaspoon of soda ash, and I get that at the Woolery or Griffin Dyeworks or Dharma Trading. And then I do just a splash of like ecological, like e-cover 7th generation dish soap, and I put that in my crock pot on high for about an hour. I let it get really pretty hot, and then I let it soak overnight, which is really, really good because some of the stuff that they put on our fabrics is really scary. And for sliver or cotton fibers, I would put it in, I would mordant it with alum, and you don't want to ever use too much alum. So I use maybe just about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of alum, depending on how much fiber I have. So any other questions? I'm so sorry this got like all funky and everything. Oh yeah, and the book on Navajo natural dyes, I've heard great things about that book. Some of my favorite books are Journey in Natural Dyeing. A Dyer's Garden is really amazing, and there's a newish book out, and I got it on the Kindle, and I've been reading it a lot actually, and it's called The Wild Dyer. And so it's written by somebody, I think she might be up in either Northern California or she may be like in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. And she does a lot of foraging. So she talks a lot about going out and finding sticks and leaves and twigs and seeing what happens with them. So I like to stick to some of the things that I know, but then I like to play with them. So for example, one of the pieces that I did was, let's see, yeah. Here we go. Yeah, my great assistant, she's helping me get everything. This little shrug that I made for Alex, I'm just going to put it up here on so you can see all the different colors. Many of the colors sort of that have the ombre in them, what's happened is some of them I've over dyed with different things. So for example, this one I think is, I know that orange is Coreopsis, so I can get a really great orange from Coreopsis. But with some of the darker colors up here, one of them I started with, I think I did hibiscus, and it gave me a gray, and I didn't really like it. So so then what I did was I over dyed it with I think with the hibiscus, I overdyed it with pomegranate. And so I got a little bit of a different color. So instead of gray, I ended up getting sort of a more orangey color. And then I started getting more sort of almost maroon colors up in here. So some of the fun things to do with easy peasy dyeing is I don't have it going right now, but usually I have 2 dye pots going, and I will take something out from one dye pot after a day and throw it in the other dye pot and see what happens. So just that to see the interplay between the 2 different dyes and things. So I think until I run out of different methods to mix and match, I'm kind of I'm limiting my foraging to everything that's in my garden. So any other questions at this point? So I'm just gonna sort of recap here of the 3 things that I did when I was off camera. Alex is laughing. What happened? Nothing. What did I do? Nothing. Okay. All right. So there's my assistant, and I'm making her embarrassed, which is awesome. But the 3 things that I did when I was off camera, and I'll show you now. I think we've probably got enough to show you that how things look. But the first thing that I did was put my dye stuff into my eucalyptus dye stuff into my pot, and I usually just, and this has been in there for now almost an hour. So we'll see. You can see that we're actually, my zoom. Yep, it's okay. My camera's still on. We're actually getting more orange with that. So that's sort of a neat orange. It's a little hard to see here. That's actually kind of a nice salmony orange. I might at this point just say, hey, that's really cool. And it's a nice color, and turn that off. So the last time I did eucalyptus, I actually let it soak for a lot longer, and I let it boil for a lot longer to get more of the dye stuff out. And it became a much darker color. That's actually pretty cool. So that's just an hour's worth of eucalyptus bark and a little bit of water on high in the crock pot. So, and then, yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Do you strain the bark out of the liquid before you use it to dye?
That's a great question. It depends on the dye stuff and on how lazy I am. So, and what I'm dyeing. So, with the eucalyptus bark, I probably would, because this is very, it takes up a lot of space in the dye pot, right? So, does that smell good? Yeah. It smells like, whenever I do this and I put something, it always smells like minty sheep. So, so with the eucalyptus bark, I probably would strain it out. So it's a little hot at the moment, but since I've turned this off, and I do have a strainer nearby, I can always show you how to do that. But I just strain it, and because I haven't put any mordants or anything crazy in this, I have a little corner in my garden, in my patio, where I just put the old bark and use it kind of as mulch. So so that's kind of the neat thing too, is when I do something like this, most of the dye stuff just goes back into my garden as sort of compost. But something like this, I would definitely strain. Now, if I'm doing something like coreopsis, and if I'm looking at the dye bath, and most of the coreopsis is sort of falling to the bottom of the dye bath, and I don't think it's going to affect how much veggie matter gets into the wool. I dye a lot of wool and cottons. Then I will usually just, I might just leave it in there. So I did do a pomegranate bath recently, where I just let the pomegranates float to the bottom, and I just kept them in there. I didn't strain them out, just to see what would happen. Sometimes what happens though, when you do that, if you're doing it with cloth, with fabric, is that any errant dye stuff that is coming through, like any piece of bark that hits your cloth. So for example, if this piece of bark were to actually hit part of my cloth, whatever the dye stuff is that's hitting your cloth will probably make that darker in terms of your cloth. So, and I do have an example of that. So Alex, here, let's scooch. Alex, can you hand me that sheet there, please? Awesome. The sheet, that one. Yeah, thanks. Oh, yeah, you can just pull it out. That's okay. So we have all sorts of examples over here, and I don't know if we'll be able to see them very well, but this particular sheet is the one that I just took out of my pomegranate bath recently. And as you can see, it might be a little bit hard here. Yeah, there we go. This little bit here is where, so I didn't take the pomegranate out of my pot. And so this is where the actual pomegranate hit my fiber. So I haven't washed this yet from after being in the dye pot. I'm letting it cure for a couple of days outside, but this might not wash out. So I might get some spotting that way. I actually like the spotting. So on some projects, and on some projects I don't, but it depends on if it's this is kind of a lazy see what goes on project, but if it's a project where I really want consistency, then I will definitely strain my things out of the dye bath. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? I'm gonna go this way now.
Yes, I was wondering if you've ever dyed with cinnamon bark.
No, but I want to. So cinnamon bark and turmeric also would be great to do. So I suspect it would be a very similar experience as eucalyptus. So have you tried that? Have you tried
No, I'm not a
cinnamon?
dyer. I just like to watch the videos.
When we're on camera, when you don't have dead air, right, for half an hour. No, I haven't tried that, and I also know there's turmeric. One thing that I did try, and I'm going to turn my camera back, and then I'm going to show you guys the dye pot with the food dyes, because that's getting pretty hot there, and I think you'll be able to get a sense of what that will look like. So some of the food stuff that you can dye with, things like onion skins, I'm saving this up. I haven't tried them, but I've heard people do that with a lot of success. Turmeric is great, and cinnamon bark. So there are a lot of things that you can do from your kitchen as well. I have dyed with avocado pits and avocado skins. I love what I got from the avocado pits much more than the skins. Skins are really hard because you really have to scrape off all the green avocado or else it gets gunky in there. And that's definitely, the pits, I did not strain my dye bath with the pits, but I definitely strained my dye bath with the skins. So I did throw things in with the pits just because I liked that. I could see that there was still color coming off of the pits. So I did it until there was just nothing left. I also, another easy peasy thing is I keep these dye pots going. Oh, fun, onion skins and Easter eggs. Yes, absolutely. And also old Easter egg dye. So that's how my husband met, proposed to me. He proposed to me one Easter morning, and I had used all the extra dye from egg dyes to dye my wool. So one thing that I do also you can find is the jamaica. So that's the same as hibiscus. The hibiscus I get that I forage, I tend to get a lot of grays from. And hibiscus, you have to be very careful. You don't want it to get too hot because then it will just lose all the color and it gets super mushy. So that's another one that you definitely need to strain. I have tried hibiscus from the store before in a few things. I think my husband had some leftover jamaica juice or some jamaica something, and he didn't want to use it, some of the flowers. And so I just threw it into the dye pot, and I ended up getting some nice pinks from that. So that's a sort of a neat thing to do too. But yeah, no, I haven't tried those, not yet. Soon. So yeah, that's so cool. Tunic with onion skins. Yes. And another thing that's similar too, and what they do in Korea actually, is they dye a lot with persimmons. So they'll use persimmon skins to dye with as well. So there's a whole, and I can always add that to the handout that I sent to John. There's a whole movement in India, of all places, for medicinal dyeing. So eucalyptus is an example. Anything that I dye with this, and I actually, the pomegranates also. So the case that I just showed you guys, I've over dyed with pomegranate and eucalyptus and loquat, and I think I've used coreopsis as well in that. I've just sort of kept dyeing to see what happens. It's not one I use to see if the dye is true or not. But there's a medicinal dyeing movement. So that means dyeing with persimmons, pomegranates, lavender, loquat. So some of these things that we also use. So cinnamon bark would be a great example of that. Onions, some of the things that we use internally to have a healthy diet. And we also want to start putting on our skins. So that's the movement there. So any other questions before I show you guys what we've got in the crockpot dye pot? No? Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch my camera around now, and I'm just going to show you guys. So this is just on, I think we're on high just because I knew that our time was short, but this is already, you can see that the dye has pretty much hit my fiber really well. Now I can, let's see, I'm gonna, this one's got stuff in it, so it's a little hard to do. But what I will want to do to make certain to see if my dye stuff has my dye bath has exhausted is I will go in and then see if I'm still getting color in my cup. That means there's still a lot of dye left in the bath, and so I might just keep this on in the crock pot. Just I don't want to make it boil, but I'll keep it on either low or high for maybe another hour, or low for another few hours. And then I'll leave this overnight. And by the end of the morning, my fiber will be cold. It will have cooled down throughout the evening. And then it will also, my dye bath usually will have exhausted. So I am gonna leave this on, put this on to low. So that's what I do with that. And then what will happen is I will then just wash that. And because it's already sort of at a room temperature water, I don't have to worry about putting something that's hot into hot wool into cooler water. So I tend to keep the water at the same temperature that my wool is. With cotton, it's not so much of an issue, but I don't do cotton in the crock pot so much, except for the natural dyeing. So any other questions? We're coming up on 5 o'clock. Happy hour. Thank you guys for your patience. Wow, we were all set up and we were like doing a whole tag team, and we got some jokes and everything even. Oh, well, but this is also, so you can see this is actually, and this is, it's cooled down quite a bit. So I'm just gonna, because I have a tablecloth on here, I'm just gonna put it on here. The brown that we did actually did take up a little bit of color, so not much. Brown's not so great for much, but I figured why not. But you can see this is, once this dries, it'll be of course a shade or two lighter. But you can see we've got a lot of really cool. This is sort of, if you really want to make a fun, colorful. You want to take your roving and make it fun and colorful. So those are a great way to do this, and it's just super easy. I've used I usually tend to stick along the same colorway, so I tend to do a lot of blues and purples and pinks and greens and such, but I've gotten a lot of yellows and oranges that are really nice out of the microwave. I use it a lot also for felting, so I take a lot of my felted pieces, and after I've created the piece, I'll just throw it in the microwave and dye that. You do need a little bit more food dye in terms of the dye stuff when you do that. So I only use a couple, 2 or 3 drops, I think, per color here for for my microwave dyeing, but when I'm dyeing for roving, but when I'm dyeing felt, I usually double that. So felt needs a lot. It soaks up the color like you wouldn't believe. So that's it. Anybody else? Any more questions, comments, resources you would like to share? Don't be shy. Nope. Oh, one more. Oh, thank you. Well, thank you guys for your patience. I'm so sorry that we lost you for half an hour. Oh, well. I've had it's been a crazy Zoomy week, so it doesn't surprise me that this happened. But just the long and short of it is the two things that my key takeaways before we sign off is the crock pot is your friend. So throw things in the crock pot that are not poisonous, that you know, or that you've heard about, or that you've found, or you can get them off the internet. Like I say, everything I've shown you is everything that I started doing this past year is stuff from my local environment. It's things in my garden. It's things within a block or two of my home. Throw them in the crock pot, see what happens. I mean, you can see after an hour, we have some really great colors happening on our eucalyptus. I actually think I'm just going to turn it off now and just leave it at that. And then, you know, throw whatever you want in there and see what happens. The worst thing that can happen is you over dye things and do it again. And my enthusiasm, thank you. I'm just lazy. So, and you know, and then what's really cool about like lazy dyeing and easy peasy dyeing is like you can do this and it's fun and there's always something going on in the dye pot. And then if you want to explore further and you want to get more into like the science of it, so that's what this actually sent me into researching about the science and the tannins. And I actually do own, believe it or not, some pH strips. So then what I did was I would start researching what different additives did. And I did the shrug that I showed you that I did for my daughter is actually pieces from a dye study that I did with everything in my garden. So I labeled everything, but now I knitted it up and I said, I don't care, because I kind of have an idea of what the different colors do. So one of the things with natural dyeing is we're always kind of afraid, I think, a little bit, because there's so many different mordants and things. But if you stick to simple things like just a little bit of alum, citric acid for your woolens if you want, if you don't feel comfortable using alum, and then your dye stuff, especially things like eucalyptus, pomegranate, loquat trees, coreopsis, things that you know will yield some colors, then you're going to get some really great results. And of course, food dye is awesome. No matter what, your stuff is going to look pretty cool after 5 minutes in the microwave. So on that note, I come over here, Alex. So thank you. Oh, Alex is hiding.
I'll come over myself.
So, okay. All right. On that note, Alex and I would really like to thank you for your patience. She's in hiding here. She might come in at her own time. Yes. Oh, you'll do it yourself? Okay.
No.
Yes. What? Yes. Okay. Yes. She started dyeing about what, 5 years ago, I think it was.
When Pop did his,
yeah, that was 5 years ago. I started spinning again. So she started dyeing with food color about 5 years ago, and she's been natural dyeing with me as well. So so she's our next generation, and she's my helper. And so thank you, Alex, for that. And I hope you guys have a great time and experiment. Just buy a cheap old crock pot, throw stuff in, leave it overnight, and see what happens.
Okay. Thank you very much, Katie. And I'm sorry too that we did not get to see everything as you were doing it, but this has been a great class, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you around again and getting a chance to make it again. So
absolutely. We'll make certain our setup works better. When we switch cameras, we'll make certain it actually works. We tried. We did it, but we did it with my Zoom account. So you never know if you're logging in with somebody else, and you never know.
Yeah.
So you guys have a great time. Enjoy. Stay safe. It's crazy out there, and throwing stuff in the crock pot is just, it's really therapeutic because it gives you something to look forward to every morning. Like, hey, I wonder what's going to happen. So thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. And the recording is going on.